Приветствую всех. Я бы хотел продолжить тему.
Welcome everyone, and I want to pick up where Sarkis has left earlier today. We'll discuss internet legislation and IT legislation, recent legislation, the practice of its implementation, and the draft legislation that is currently sitting in the State Duma. And maybe together with you we can think which steps can the internet business or community or industry take in order to respond to this legislative turmoil. The government has always been interested in people's communications, also online. Already in the early 2000s, SORM 2 was introduced, but our top management, the top management of the country, has always insisted that no stupid blockings or prohibitions should exist, that the industry should be self-regulating, which has already been a success factor in its development earlier, so the government should not really mess with the internet. But several days after those statements from the top officials of the country, the network community learned about new draft legislation that presumed out-of-court blocking of online information already in July 2012. This draft law was passed through the State Duma, although the society protested, the industry protested, but this Yandex and Google and Rayak and others protested. They all suggested amendments to this draft law, but this draft law, the very first one, was sped through the State Duma, and on the 1st of August 2012, the first register of websites that enabled out-of-court blocking of internet resources came into effect. But before this law was adopted, already we were saying that there was a slit. It was the first provision to keep the door open. It's like putting your a leg through the door, and after that the copyright owners will do their best to make sure they can block any internet resource at their whim, which actually happened in summer last year. There was massive support from the state television. All the channels started barking at the internet, describing the horrors of the internet, and the anti-pirate legislation passed through the State Duma. Although the industry and the civil society protested, it was speedily passed through the parliament, and on the 1st of August 2013, the second register of banned web pages was put into operation, which included the internet resources that the copyright owners wanted to prohibit. There is this portal, Russian public initiative. You know that if you get 100,000 signatures at this portal for your initiative, it should be discussed by the government and the parliament. Well, ours got 100,000 required, but the government just closed its eyes to this initiative and said they don't want to do anything about it. In autumn last year, there was a whole horde of new pieces of legislation that provided for new burdens for the IT business, for discrimination in the internet. Draft law by Lugavoy turned into the actual law on political censorship. The main point of this law on political censorship, well, unlike previous laws to block resources, this one enabled blocking an internet resource immediately without preliminarily notifying the hoster and the owner of the internet resource. So first you block, then you inform. And practice shows that it only takes several hours after the General Prosecutor's Office issues the necessary papers. All these laws they all had a kind of a camouflage. First law was adopted to protect children from the horrors of the internet. The other one was to protect the Russian movie-making industry. The latest law officially was adopted to protect the country from extremists and terrorists, but the government, if we talk about 139, about that law, the government does not inform the society about whether this new law enabled reducing the level of suicide among teenagers or drugs addiction. So there is no statistics on the implementation of the law and the efficiency and effectiveness of the law practice. But we do have other kind of statistics which you can check if you want to. We know how many resources were blocked. We monitor all these resources. Currently, this slide, I think I made it, well, several days before the conference, but the figures stay the same more or less. Right now, there are 3 registers of blocked resources. They contain more than 2,000 entries. And at the same time, about 56,000 other bona fide resources are blocked together with those prohibited resources. They do not contain any illegal information, but they are blocked by IP address, which is enabled by the Russian legislation. About 56% of all blocked internet resources are blocked without due legal reason. In total, since the time of commencement of these resources, 137,000 domain names were blocked for no reason in this country. They did not contain any illegal information, but they were blocked together with others. They were incidental victims. Here you can see the statistics of the actual URLs blocked, and other victims. On several occasions, the IP address of Google was entered onto this register. Its services were blocked. Also, WordPress.com, because of 2 blogs, were entered onto the register, and that's why several dozens of thousands of blogs were blocked in Russia. Several pages of Wikipedia are permanently on the banned websites register. It's interesting that even such companies as Kaspersky Labs were blocked, because although we know that these companies are really loyal to censorship in Russia, to the policies of the government, and they are not against of certain information being blocked, but even those loyal companies were blocked. Regressive lawmaking is regressing even further. Currently, there are about 20 draft laws in the parliament that aim at introducing new restrictions on the operation of IT businesses. Well, this slide is slightly outdated. I know that not 2, but already 4 laws were adopted since autumn last year. 2 more laws. Law 97 on the bloggers, or as it is officially known, on communication of citizens online, and another law on restricting internet payments. Draft laws that did not pass, either they were too notorious even for the initiator, and the initiator revokes them, or other draft laws that were not adopted duplicated the ones that have been already adopted. There will be another law coming into effect on the 1st of August. The anti-piracy law passed through the first reading. It extends the criteria of banned information. So it used to be movies and films, but now all copyright property will be subject to this law. And then there is also another law on disseminating inaccurate information about banks. We have about 20 of draft laws to more or less the same effect. I tried to classify them here according to categories. Well, one category is introducing penalties for placing or non-placement of certain information. Then there is another category of draft laws to control communications of citizens. Then there's another category restricting the activity of online media. And most of these draft laws introduce new categories of banned information. In total, you will see more types of new prohibitions than there are laws, because in one law there may be several types of penalties, fines, etc., etc. Then there are regulations, other regulations, bylaws that regulate the internet's environment. РосКомNadzor produced a report of several thousand pages. Really, it is truly notorious. In particular, they are saying that they want to make sure that children do not view any nakedness in masterpieces, in the pieces of art, in art. There is a similar regulation of the Ministry of Culture. There is an agreement between РосКомNadzor and the anti-drugs service. An internet resource is banned even if it doesn't contain any illegal information, but it publishes URLs and domain names and an IP address where illegal content is stored. We publish public monitoring of banned resources. We keep that list, we publish it, we make it public, and it means that even that resource is illegal because we are posting links to the banned resources. So far, no sanctions have applied to us, but you never know. There is another case when the Ministry of Education and Science prepared draft regulation of the government. One of the items of this regulation is surveillance over educators and students, not only in schools, not only inside the education network, but online in general. Well, this draft regulation was presented at regulation.gov.ru. It's a portal for public discussions. We publicized this case as much as we could. We informed everybody we could about this draft regulation. We asked the users to share their opinion. And of course, our users were dead against it because you cannot really trace all the internet users. And now this draft regulation was modified, and it no longer speaks of surveillance over teachers and students. Public hearings didn't lead to much in this country, but once in a while we can push through with our agenda. So that time we won. There aren't many cases like this, and that's why we're especially proud of this. On this slide, I'm listing what each of you can do as a citizen, or what we can do together as a society. We need to understand how access to information is provided. We must use encryption methods and tools. If you are an owner of an internet resource, and if you believe that your website is blocked illegally, unlawfully, then we recommend that you go to court, and we will be ready to provide you with legal and information support. We have Sarkis, you know him, so he is ready to be your legal advisor. Please participate in public hearings whenever the government permits one. Sometimes, once in the blue moon, we can change the policy of the government. It doesn't happen every time, but you have to start somewhere. On this slide, you will find our key proposals, what IT business can do in this context. You have to understand that politics is not part of our life. It has already set its foot in our home, in the internet, and we cannot stay indifferent. We should educate clients and users. We should inform them enlighten them, if you will. I'll just share an example from my personal experience. I tried to enter a banned resource like grani.ru. My provider shows me a page stating that this resource is prohibited by the government, but if you do not agree with censorship, please follow this link where you can find the information about how you can bypass the censorship, the blocking. So such legal activity of an operator is not illegal. It is legal, and I know that 5 or 7 operators are already using such messages. I don't know about other portals, but I'm sure that there are many activists among us. I mean, so if you disagree with the policy of the government, if you disagree with censorship, if you want to protest, you can block the resource, but show the user a page explaining how this block can be overcome. There is a need for all of us, for the whole industry, to get together and to establish a lobby that would protect our interests at the political level. Right now, there is only RAC, and we need to do something more. We need to have a stronger lobby. And please go to court, sue them. If you disagree again with the actions of the government offices and agencies, if you want to challenge the penalty imposed, and we can provide information and legal support. Once again, we already have successful cases when the court would uphold the rights of the operator. Sarkis has mentioned that when РосКомСвобода sued the operator for not downloading the data from the register of banned resources, and then the court again upheld the right of the operator and recognized that uploading the registered data is not part of the license agreement. And that's not just one precedent. We had such cases in St. Petersburg and in Moscow. It's not a widespread practice, but we have individual cases, and we need to promote that success. This is what we do. That's our activity. We monitor the legislative database, including draft legislation. We set up РосКомНадзор, which is a platform for public discussions. The experts and anyone can participate in discussing the most notorious draft laws. We are about to set up a Center for Protection of Digital Rights. This is our legal practice. We publish infographics. We have interactive infographics. We provide the tools to re-establish access to the information, and we also participate in different activism events to protect the freedom of speech and information in the internet. Although the overall context is pretty sad, and the government does everything to over-regulate the internet, I'm sure that internet will not go anywhere and will stay in Russia, but let's make sure that the internet doesn't turn into a zombie box. Questions? I have a question. Oh, there's a line at the microphone. Please join the queue. Viktor Safronov is my name. Artem, at this rate, how soon, I mean, how long will it take the State Duma to legally ban bypasses of the blocks? Well, about 6 months ago, I felt like our government is at the crossroads. At this rate of closing down the internet, 6 months ago, we had a choice. We know that in some countries there are also practices of out-of-court blocking of internet resources, but all these blockings in other countries happen under a very strong public control. You cannot block a resource without getting a pushback from the society, or we will follow the, let's call it the Asian route. But after the law on political censorship was adopted, and after another 20 draft laws appeared in the State Duma since last autumn, I think that right now we're not choosing between East and West, but now we're choosing between China and North Korea. I think that introducing a ban to bypass the blockings, the VPNs, Tor's ban, I think that this is a thing of the very near future. Maybe the worst is for the best. Maybe if we don't do anything, maybe if tomorrow ВКонтакте or Одноклассники are blocked, people will go onto the streets, or they won't. Well, ВКонтакте and Одноклассники, the Facebooks of Russia, they were blocked, not on a massive scale, but in some regions. And I have never seen a case when after ВКонтакте or Одноклассники or My World or Google Plus, and they were limited and the access was restricted to them in certain regions. I have never seen demonstrations on the streets. But yeah, these blockings lasted for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, maybe if ВКонтакте or Facebook is blocked for several months. I don't know what will happen, and I cannot give you any promises, but when ВКонтакте is blocked for a couple of days, there was no response from the civil society. I can tell you what happens when Google, for instance, is entered on the list. Technical support goes on a strike. Because nothing happens, right? People start calling us, or they call us, right? They call the technical support, and the technical support of a provider, of an operator, goes on strike. My name is Ilya Popov. I'm from Fjord, and my question is, when there is a court resolution to block a resource, then the hoster is liable. He at least has to pay court fees. Okay, but you have a hoster. He has a VPS, which is placed on a server, physical server, which is placed in a data center, and the data center is connected to an internet provider, to an ISP. So who is liable? The resource is blocked, but who is liable? Everyone? Do you mean who the resource owner should go to? You have a court resolution. The court says that the hoster, the hosting provider, placed information, makes this information open. If the resolution of the court speaks of a specific hosting provider, then it will be the hosting provider that's liable. If it's the first in line, well, whoever is easier to reach for our law enforcement agencies, he will be held liable. I mean, all these laws today are manually managed, really, and if you want to put pressure on an internet resource, all those laws immediately become very effective, and a lot of pressure is put on everyone. I don't think that we can expect mass-scale blocking of internet resources, even if we have more and more of those laws, but there are more, how shall I put it, there are more guillotines now, there are more penalties, there are more ways now to cut a whole country from the internet. So, but right now, the biggest risk is with the hosting provider, right? The data center. But data center, does it have any risks? I cannot give you the answer. I know of cases when a supervisor went to court and sued the telecom operator because one website contained wrong kind of information. It was the operator, not the owner of the resource, but the operator that was sued. I know that hosting providers were also charged, but ISPs probably not. I don't have that information. As a moderator, I want to abuse that right, and I want to ask you several questions that pertain to the topic of our conference. Do you plan to run an international cooperation initiative? RIPE NCC is always calling upon everyone to put their heads together, to join forces, to cooperate. So I'm thinking about some kind of cooperation project in Warsaw. There was a working group meeting on cooperation, and we heard two wonderful presentations, one on how to bypass blockings in the countries of the Arab world, because there First, they find out what is blocked, because you can't really find out even what is blocked, and then they help you bypass them. And then there was a presentation, if I'm not mistaken, from the MIT. MIT offers new interesting protocols to bypass blocking. So your international cooperation, any plans for it? Are you ready now to cooperate with the RIPE NCC or with the community? Well, international cooperation. We know that there are other organizations like the EFF, Electronic Frontiers Fund, for instance, or Access. We have some initial contacts, but we don't have very close cooperation with the international colleagues. But of course, we would love to have more international cooperation to protect, to defend common interests on the global scale. And if I mean, maybe it's just that we don't know who we should talk to. So if you know who you are, please address us, and then we'll see how we can make this world a better place. 2 more questions. Okay, I suggest that we turn to a more constructive mode of discussion. I agree with Artem that there are many problems. I really agree. I'm not faking it or anything. I know that Russian legislation is rather prohibitive. What is your question? The Russian legislation is not only prohibitive, but all these prohibitions are non-systemic. It is disbalanced. It doesn't contain many development measures. What is your question, please? Could you please, you could have made a presentation here, Sonia. I'm getting to the gist of my question. So maybe you can make a presentation at our next conference if you cannot get to the essence of. Okay, a short question then. What are there any progressive provisions in the Russian legislation? Is there hope? Do you see hope? Well, wonderful. There was this draft law that we prepared together with the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. It's the draft law to eliminate Law 118, to terminate it, to invalidate it. Speaking about the positive agenda, together with the communists last week, we introduced 2 more draft laws to the parliament. One of them is on returning the Soviet cultural heritage into the public domain. So everything that was produced in the Soviet times and that is of cultural heritage value, it must be returned into the public domain. And another thing, the copyright that was produced through the financing of the government during the Soviet time. We want this also, the time frame to be reduced. Do you know about the presidential draft law, which has already passed through the first reading, which enables the citizens and the public organizations to have an impact on the government? Well, wonderful if it works. Exactly. I mean, just a public hearing that you mentioned, I do not see any meaning in that. Okay, next time, please make a presentation on the positive legislation. At the Duma, we discussed that yesterday. This draft law will work, and I'll explain when it works. If we work actively and if we use the working groups. No, wait. He was talking about public hearings. What is the difference? Well, Alexander, I think, what Sophia says is actually important. Right now, the government is trying to introduce tools of electronic democracy. There is the Russian Public Initiative, the petitions portals, but these things exist, but they do not work. There is no legal outcome of all the public hearings. All these public hearings, they exist pro forma, they exist for the sake of themselves, but their results have no impact. But if there is a new draft law that makes the outcomes of these public hearings a useful instrument, something that that has an effect, and I will only welcome that. Another question, last question. Is there at least one law that says that things should keep working and should not be, well, I don't know, if you read the law on telecommunications, the operators offer services or they do not offer services, but are there any provisions in the law that make the operators provide the services, whatever the circumstances? The law on telecom, the law on mass media, read those. Okay, my other question is, right now hosting providers share their resources, there aren't enough IP resources. Can you please ask RIPE to provide more IP addresses? Implement IPv6, that's what RIPE will tell you. It's the standard answer. And the very, very last question, and the shortest one possible. Yes, I have a tiny question. Have you tried to cooperate with the government? Yes, we tried. We tried to talk to supervisors. We are in direct contact with some of them. But in fact, we talked to your ordinary bureaucrats, and they are bureaucrats. They say that they act on instructions, they are government officers, and they comply with the law. But at the level of legislators, the State Duma, the Council of the Federation, yes, I attended their meetings. They talk, they close the door behind them, and that's the end of it. Everything that is decided behind closed doors. Well, it seems like now RAEC is viewed by the government as the industry representative, but I think that RAEC it's not capable of fully protecting the rights of the interest community. I think that we need a stronger lobby.
I represent Transtelecom. Well, it looks good for you. But I mean, the blocking by the IP address is a barbaric thing to do. What do we need to do? Spend some money on DPIs and put them on every node. I'm not from business, I'm from the public organizations. So, if you had implemented the first law on blocking certain sites by IP address, and then you realized that it was admitted by the state that they did something wrong and they need to make some adjustments there, but there are no adjustments going on, but instead there is more and more legislation adopted, which also are all based on limiting the access to certain resources. So I think they should have brushed up the first law in the first place, used the multi-stakeholder principles, and develop the principles which would be suitable for everyone, the business, the society, the state, and then follow with the next step. But it doesn't work this way. It works differently here. There are no discussions. Instead, there is more legislation adopted. They are all based upon blocking principles. Block this and block that. We hate DPI, we hate blocking. We are against this legislation, even if you don't want to discuss it with us. Thank you. If there is no dialogue, there'll be confrontation. That's what you mean. No, we are open for dialogue. We are open for discussion. But they don't want it. You may look, I mean, you may watch the video. It's 1 hour and a half long, and if you watch it, you will see the standpoint of the government. And Artem was there, by the way. Thank you very much, Artem, for a very emotional presentation. Thanks.